My name is Diane. I'm standing on the balcony of my apartment in San Francisco, the bay stretching out beneath the night sky, bridges glimmering like threads of light. Wrapping a shawl around my shoulders, I'm lost in thought, the events of the past year flashing before my eyes. It all started at Christmas. I was sitting cross-legged on the hardwood floor of my childhood living room. The air was filled with the faint smell of artificial pine and cinnamon candles, a scent that had accompanied every Christmas since I was a kid. Bits of wrapping paper were scattered around me, and I pressed my palms to my knees to stop them from shaking. My father, a strict and domineering man, stood up. His eyes were fixed on my brother, Ryan, with an obvious look of pride. "Your very own Mercedes-Benz," he announced, dangling the key fob in front of Ryan. Ryan, a 25-year-old who had always been the apple of my parents' eyes, leaped to his feet. His perfectly styled hair fell into place as if this moment had been carefully choreographed. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of the shiny black car in the driveway, crowned with a huge red bow that almost obscured the windshield. The red satin shimmered under the weak winter sun. My mother, a gentle-looking but equally biased woman, clasped her hands beneath her chin as if she were witnessing a miracle. Ryan grinned and spun the keys like a magician with a coin. I could almost hear the unspoken words, "He was the chosen one, the worthy one." Across my lap was a cheesy piggy bank, the kind you'd find in discount bins near the checkout. There was a small sticker on its underside that read $3.99, and my parents hadn't even bothered to peel it off. My mother urged me to open it. I turned the stopper, and 2 tattered bills fluttered into my palm. $5, my father chuckled, waving his hand dismissively. "A start for your future home fund. You've always been the responsible one." Ryan leaned down, pressing his perfumed shoulder against mine, and whispered that he'd give me a ride in the Mercedes whenever I needed. I placed the piggy bank carefully on the coffee table. The sound of its hollow shell knocking against the glass seemed to ring louder than their laughter, louder than my own silence as I excused myself and walked towards the stairs. The carpet muffled my steps as I climbed, but every creak of the railing felt like an accusation. On the wall above me was a gallery of framed photographs. Ryan's grinning face filled almost every frame at his soccer games, at prom, beside European landmarks that my parents had proudly financed. My own appearances were few, tucked into the corners like afterthoughts. I closed the bathroom door and turned the lock. The click sounded louder than it should have. The mirror above the sink showed my pale face under the harsh light. My eyes were dry when they should have been filled with tears. I pressed my palms to the cold counter, trying to steady myself against the swell of anger that I had held back for so long. Memories flooded back. In high school, I was the valedictorian, but my parents had driven across town to watch Ryan's junior varsity soccer game. I had to deliver my speech to a half-empty row. In college, I worked 25 hours a week at the campus bookstore and cafeteria, juggling classes, scholarships, and loans. Meanwhile, Ryan was sketching in cafes across Europe, with my parents quietly wiring him money, even though they always claimed they had no extra funds. "You always manage on your own," they used to say. At first, I took it as a compliment, but later I realized it was just an excuse to give Ryan more. The piggy bank with its $5 burned in my memory. It wasn't about the small amount, it was what it represented. Nothing had changed, despite my degrees, my promotions, and the years of proving myself. I whispered to the mirror, "Maybe this Christmas will be different." But the woman staring back at me knew better. Her silence had given them permission to treat me this way for far too long. I lay in my childhood bed that night, staring at the ceiling where the glow in the dark stars I'd stuck there as a 13-year-old still clung in fading patches. Sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan twirling those keys, the red bow gleaming in the window, and my parents' faces lit with pride that I had never earned. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The floorboards groaned softly, but no one stirred. I opened the closet and pulled out my old duffel bag, the one that had accompanied me from dorm rooms to apartments. I packed only the things that mattered: the stuffed rabbit my grandmother had given me the week before she died, a photo album from college filled with friends who had believed in me, and the blueprint of the first building I ever designed, creased from years of unfolding and refolding, still smelling faintly of ink. Downstairs, the tree lights blinked in a steady rhythm, illuminating the neatly wrapped gifts. I had bought my father a leather briefcase, my mother a pearl necklace, and Ryan a high-end camera lens he had casually mentioned. I set them carefully at the base of the tree. I was unwilling to carry them with me, but I couldn't bear to discard the effort I had made. In the kitchen, I removed my key from the ring and placed it beside the coffee maker. Its metal caught the light like a quiet declaration. Outside, my old Honda Civic waited, scarred with miles but reliable. I slid behind the wheel, turned the ignition, and eased onto the street as snow began to fall. Headlights cut through the darkness, and the highway stretching south seemed like an escape route just for me. For the first time, I felt the air in my chest expand, not with fear, but with the glimmer of possibility. I had been driving for hours when my phone lit up on the console. A new voicemail blinked. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. My father's voice erupted, sharp and commanding. "Diane, return the car immediately or we'll report it stolen. This childish behavior has gone far enough." I almost laughed, the sound raw in my throat. The Honda Civic, which I had bought with my own hard-earned money, the title in my name, was the one thing they could never claim. And yet, here was my father, ready to twist the truth to bring me back under their control. By dawn, I crossed into southern Oregon. Fatigue gnawed at me, and a neon sign flashing open lured me off the highway. The diner smelled of coffee and pancakes. A middle-aged waitress with streaks of gray in her hair and deep-set lines from years of smiling and frowning poured me a mug of coffee without asking. "Rough night," she said, more of a statement than a question. "Rough life," I muttered before I could stop myself. She set the pot down and looked at me with a calmness that came from having seen all kinds of heartbreak pass through her doors. "Blood makes you related. Love makes you family." Her words hit me hard, like a seed dropped into soil I didn't know was there. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into my fingers. For the first time since leaving home, I felt less alone. I finished my coffee, left a tip larger than I could afford, and stepped back into the cold morning. The road to California called me forward. Crossing into California felt like stepping into a new version of myself, even though my Honda still rattled. By the time I reached San Francisco, exhaustion was weighing on my shoulders. But the city skyline glittered against the bay like a promise I hadn't dared to make to myself. I parked in front of a pastel-colored Victorian on a quiet street, clutching the address I'd texted only hours earlier. The door swung open before I knocked. My college roommate, Lily, pulled me inside. Her curly hair was damp from a shower, and her arms were strong around me. She didn't ask why I had shown up with a duffel bag and hollow eyes. She just said, "Family doesn't treat family like that," and pointed me towards the spare room. I slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke, sunlight spilled across unfamiliar walls, and something in me felt lighter. Over steaming mugs of coffee, Lily coaxed the story out of me, listening without judgment. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Then, you're staying here until you figure out what comes next." No arguments. What came next arrived faster than I expected. Within a week, I requested a transfer to the San Francisco office of my engineering firm. My supervisor approved without hesitation, and suddenly I wasn't adrift anymore. I was rebuilding my life. Lily insisted I see someone, sliding a card across the kitchen table. It was for Dr. Emily Thompson, a psychologist. In Dr. Thompson's office, filled with shelves of well-worn books and the smell of lavender, I finally said the word out loud: favoritism. Dr. Thompson didn't flinch. She nodded, as if naming it was the first step towards defiance. One Saturday, Lily dragged me to a pottery class. I protested until my hands sank into the cool clay. It resisted at first, then yielded, and by the end, I had shaped a lopsided little bowl, ugly and beautiful at the same time. I couldn't stop staring at it. It was proof that even imperfect beginnings could take form. That night, I took the piggy bank from my bag and slid a $5 bill inside. The sound of the bill catching in the hollow plastic was louder than I expected, like a marker struck against the air. I decided I'd add one each week, not as a reminder of their insult, but as a measure of the life I was building for myself. When Lily asked how long I planned to stay, I looked at her across the table, the piggy bank between us, and said, as long as it takes. It didn't take long for the rumors to reach me. Old coworkers from back home sent cautious messages, asking if I was okay, saying they'd heard I'd had a breakdown. One even hinted that I'd joined some strange cult in California. The absurdity would have made me laugh if it didn't hurt so much. My parents were spreading their version of the story, and people were believing it. Ryan wasn't subtle either. His Instagram was filled with photos of him leaning against the Mercedes, the red bow still dramatically draped across the hood. Captions like "To our success," "Dream car," and "Blessed" glowed under likes from family, friends, and neighbors. In the comments, my mother cheered him on, and my father added a line about hard work paying off. It was as if they were carving my absence into stone. But in San Francisco, things were different. After I presented new calculations that cut weeks off a high-rise project schedule, my team lead pulled me aside. "Brilliant work, Diane," he said, and he meant it. Colleagues nodded, their eyes filled with respect that I had craved for years but never received at home. I left the office that day with a spring in my step, the city buzzing around me like an affirmation. Still, when night fell and the apartment grew quiet, guilt seeped in. I'd lie awake wondering if I had abandoned them, if I was being selfish. Dr. Thompson helped me see through those feelings. "That isn't love," she said calmly. "It's emotional control disguised as love, perhaps even felt as love by them, but its purpose is to bind you, not free you." Her words rippled outward, touching every part of me. I realized that my family's approval had never been a measure of my worth, and their disappointment was never proof of my failure. The next week, I slid another $5 bill into the piggy bank and heard the faintest echo of strength in the hollow plastic, as if each bill carried the weight of my refusal to be diminished. Then, a few months later, an envelope arrived on a Thursday, wedged between bills and grocery flyers. It was made of heavy ivory paper, and my name was written in a looping calligraphy. There was no +1 offered. I turned it over in my hands until it felt heavier than it should have been. It was an invitation to my cousin Sarah's wedding in Portland, and I was expected to attend. For days, I left the envelope on the counter, unopened. Its presence filled the apartment like a question I didn't want to answer. When I finally told Dr. Thompson, she tilted her head. "Avoiding isn't the same as healing," she said. "Sometimes the only way to test your boundaries is to stand inside them." I booked a room at a downtown hotel that same afternoon. When my father called, insisting I stay at the family's rental house with everyone else, I answered with silence until his voice cracked into anger. "Suit yourself," he spat before hanging up. For the first time, I didn't rush to smooth things over. The following weekend, Lily helped me choose a dress. It was a midnight blue silk dress, tailored to fit me without apology. I caught my reflection in the mirror and saw the echo immediately. The same blue that had once been tied into a bow around Ryan's Mercedes, but this time it was mine, worn like armor instead of a symbol of humiliation. "Boundaries are the message," Lily reminded me, tugging at the hem to check the length. "You don't have to explain them. You just live them." On the flight north, I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the Pacific coast vanish beneath the clouds. My pulse quickened, not from dread, but from the strange electricity of walking back into a battlefield on my own terms. By the time the plane descended into Portland's winter fog, I knew I wasn't the daughter who had left with nothing but a duffel bag. I was stepping back as someone who had built a life without them, and that difference was the only armor I needed. The knock came just after the rehearsal dinner ended. Aunt Carol found me in the corridor, her expression pinched. "Your parents asked to see you." "The library." I followed her through the maze of hallways until I reached the heavy oak door. Inside, my father paced near the fireplace. My mother sat upright in a high-backed chair, and Ryan leaned against the window frame, arms crossed. The air felt staged, rehearsed. "We need to talk as a family," my mother began, her voice trembling slightly. "Your father lost his job. My health has been fragile. We've been forced to consider selling the house. All of this started when you left." Ryan's eyes burned into me. "Do you have any idea what your silence has done?" "They're falling apart," I thought. I let their accusations hang in the air before setting my bag on the table. From it, I pulled an album, flipping it open so the pages lay flat. There were pictures of Ryan's elaborate birthday parties and my meager ones. My high school graduation speech being ignored while Ryan's soccer games were celebrated. Vacations where he was center stage and I was pushed to the margins. "This isn't imagination," I said evenly. "It's a pattern." My father scoffed, but his face reddened as I laid out my student loan statements. I had $70,000 worth of debt, while Ryan had a fully funded education and a semester in Europe. "You always managed," my mother whispered. "Managed doesn't mean unworthy," I answered, my voice steady. Then I reached for the final item, the piggy bank. I opened the stopper, and dozens of crisp $5 bills spilled across the polished wood, sliding into a messy pile between us. One for every week since Christmas, a record of what you thought I was worth, and what I've learned to claim for myself. Ryan's bravado cracked. His gaze shifted from the bills to my face, and for the first time, he said nothing. I straightened. If there's any chance of reconciliation, it requires two things: family therapy and respect for my boundaries. Otherwise, this is the last meeting we'll ever have. The night air was cool on the terrace. Roses climbed the stone wall, carrying their faint sweetness into the silence between us. Ryan leaned against the railing, his shoulders hunched in a way I'd never seen. For once, he didn't look like the golden son who always knew where the spotlight was. "I had to let the Mercedes go," he said finally, his voice rough. "Couldn't keep up with the payments. Credit cards are maxed out. Clients dried up. I'm drowning, Diane." The old me would have jumped in, offering money, making calls, rearranging my life to save him. But this time, I let his words sit. I studied his face, the desperation in it, and felt a strange mix of sadness and distance. "I'm sorry you're going through that," I said quietly. He blinked, surprised. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his bravado unraveling. "I can help you put together a budget," I offered. "That's all I can do. The rest, you'll have to figure out." He stared at me, waiting for more, waiting for the safety net that had always been there. When it didn't come, his shoulders slumped, but he nodded. Something passed between us, a recognition that I was no longer the person who would carry his weight without question. Through the terrace doors, I heard whispers drifting from the ballroom. Relatives were murmuring about my parents selling the house, speculating about money troubles and debts hidden for years. The news was heavy, but it didn't crush me. Their choices had led them here. For once, I was not the fixer. I was simply a witness, free to feel sorrow without sacrificing myself to repair what was broken. I turned back towards the golden glow of the ballroom, ready to face what still lay ahead. And now, here I am on this balcony, looking out at the bay. The piggy bank stands proudly on the mantel, no longer a symbol of insult, but of my persistence. Its weight has grown over the months, stuffed with crisp $5 bills. Each one is a reminder of the weeks I've chosen myself. Partway through dinner just now, my phone buzzed. Ryan's face appeared on the screen, thinner, wearier, but steadier. He was wearing a uniform shirt from a delivery company, and the hum of a diner was in the background. "Just wanted to say Merry Christmas," he said. I'm working doubles, but it's good for me. There was no arrogance in his tone, only humility. I wished him well, and when the call ended, I felt a